Hello, my name is Sam Davis. I'm a PhD candidate at DARE, and I'm supervised by Matthew Cleary and Clara Grazian. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm just going to present one specific project that I've been working on over the past few months, working at Xylo Systems, which is a startup based in Sydney. This project's all based around occurrence data modeling, so species occurrence data modeling. For this project, there were three main objectives. So number one was to predict the number and probability of observations of any collection of species, basically anywhere in the world. And number two was to generalize this model so it's applicable anywhere, sort of a one-size-fit-all model. And then the third objective was to decide whether a certain data set of species occurrences is actually useful or not. So we need to create some sort of metric for that. So just quickly about Xylo. Xylo Systems is a data-driven intelligence platform built for measuring and managing biodiversity. So basically, they take in lots of different data about biodiversity, ecosystem data, and then they translate that into a tool that's useful for industry to make informed decision about biodiversity, basically. So Xylo have a platform. It's a sort of a tool, and this here is just a snippet from that tool. So in the center of this circle here, you can see a specific site of interest, and then we look at a 1 kilometer radius around that site for all the occurrences of species. And so all this data is taken from the GBIF dataset, and all that data basically comes from an app called iNaturalist, which is taken from, so if someone goes out into nature and they take a picture of a specific animal, that then gets logged into the database. As like one entry with its species identifier, its location, and the time that that's been observed. So then that occurrence data then needs to be aggregated into something that can be modeled. So firstly, I'm aggregating that data. I'm querying the data based on a specific species type or collection of species. So for example, here we have birds in Melbourne. Aves is the Latin name. And then we're aggregating based on year. And then I'm splitting the domain up into a 10 by 10 grid. And then basically we're taking the observation data and we're moving it into counts-based data. So how many of the specific species are we seeing within each of these grid cells? The idea then is to create a more granular model and even predictions into the future of these counts, basically. But then from the counts-based data, we also need an error on those counts as well. So within each of these grid cells, we need to not just have the expected number of counts, but also the error on those expected number of counts as well. So I'm defining that error in two different ways. Number one is as a precision. So if there have been observations in a specific grid cell, I'm applying a 10% error on the number of observations. So for example, if there are 10 koalas spotted in one location, then maybe there's one more hiding somewhere. But then we're applying a greater error to the locations where there has been no sightings at all. Because it might be that there's no sightings there at all, but it also might be that no naturalists have been in that area. So we're applying a greater error of plus or minus one count there. So now that we have the expected number of counts and the error on those expected number of counts, we can actually start to create our model. So we're going from the data here on the left to the actual predictions on the right. And this model comes in the form of a Gaussian process. Gaussian process regression is a Bayesian technique. So it incorporates prior knowledge about the system, a priori knowledge about the system. And that prior knowledge comes in the form of a kernel function, which is basically a way of linking the covariates together, creating sort of a correlation relationship between those covariates. The covariates in question are the location of the centroid of that grid cell, and then the year. So we need to decide which kernel function is going to be best. And obviously that kernel function then combines with the training data to then create some predictions. So here is just a little run through of some tests on different kernel functions. So on the vertical axis of each of these graphs is the spatial kernel. The horizontal axis is the temporal kernel, and these are all the different combinations of those. Basically, to summarize this, green means good, orange means okay, red means bad. And what we're realizing, this is just one iteration, so this is one data set. This is, I think it's bird species in Reykjavik. But this has been run on lots of different data sets as well. And the same conclusion was sort of come to on each time that the Matern 1.5, Matern 1.5 for both spatial and temporal kernels is the way to go. So now we've achieved our first objective, which is actually creating some predictions. Our second objective, which was to create this one-size-fit-all model, which is a Gaussian process with a Matern 1.5, Matern 1.5 kernel. But now we need to decide, we need to create some sort of validity metric for the data set. So on the left here, we have an example of a useful data set. On the right, we have an example of a non-useful data set, or unusable data set. So as you can see on the right, there's not that much data. Either there's not that much data, or it's very concentrated. So we need to actually come up with a metric for that. So on the left here, we have all the properties of the data. And on the right, we have the properties of the model, the success indices of the model. So ideally, we want to be able to look at a data set and decide whether it's useful or not before actually running the model. So I ran 428 different data sets with different properties, ran the model on each of those, and we came up with this correlation matrix. So as you can see, total grid coverage, which basically is the percentage of grid cells that are occupied, is the most correlated with the success of the model, so of the data set. So looking at the total grid coverage versus each of these success metrics, you can sort of see that at about 20% grid coverage, there's an obvious shift in that the models are the data sets are actually useful. So each of these dots here represent a data set. The size of those dots are the size of the data set. So basically, what we've come up with is that if a data set has 20% grid coverage, we can run the model. If it has less than 20% grid coverage, we throw it out. So this is the final result. On the left here, you have the data, and then on the right, you have all the predictions. So going from left to right, we have the lower bound predicted number of counts, the 5th percentile, the mean number of counts, the upper bound, which is the 95th percentile, and then the probability of finding at least one of this species. And the idea here is that we could query this data in whatever way we like. We could filter it in whatever way we like. We could filter it by species name, by taxonomy group, whether it's an invasive species or not, whether it's a threatened species. You could even filter it by threatened species that are affected most by climate change, or something like that. So this is really, really useful, and it's actually now being integrated into the Xylo platform. Yeah, that's me. Thank you.